Nivritta Sandhaniyamo Bharyam Aha Prajapati Bharyamaha Prajapati Bharyam Aha Prajapatim Maitreruvacha Sasagasya Shisham Lokyam Ashasanam Pravepatim Nivritta Sandhaniyamo Bharyamaha Prajapati Maitreruvacha Sasagasya Shisham Lokyam Ashasanam Pravepatim Nivritta Sandhaniyamo Bharyam Aha Prajapati Maitreya Sasagasyam Lokyam Maitreya. The great sage Maitreya said, Swasagasya, of her own children, Ashisham, welfare, Lokyam, in the world, Ashasanam, desiring, Pravepatim, while trembling, Nivritta, averted from, Sandhya Niyama, the rules and regulations of evening, Bharyam, unto the wife, Aha, said, Prajapati, the progenitor. Maitreya said, the great sage Kashyapa thus addressed his wife, who was trembling because of fear that her husband was offended. She understood that he had been dissuaded from his daily duties of offering evening prayers, yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world. Responsively pleased, Maitreya said, the great sage Kashyapa thus addressed his wife, who was trembling because of fear that her husband was offended. She understood that he had been dissuaded from his daily duties of offering evening prayers. Yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world. So there's no purport. I will read the next verse, but just a few points here. It's a natural sentiment for a mother to be concerned about the welfare of her children. Although we see, it's becoming more and more common in Kali Yuga that they're not actually that concerned. And even we see it's not uncommon that women will give up their children for the sake of a career, for instance, or even they'll take contraceptives or whatever to avoid having children. So this is the nature of this age, and we see, as Kali Yuga progresses, these things will become more and more prominent, that there'll be less and less of this motherly sentiment towards the child, and actually they'll abandon children. And it's not uncommon. We see that, children are abandoned, like someone will come out and there's a baby sitting on the doorstep or something like that. It's not uncommon in this age. Previously it did happen, but it was in very rare circumstances, as for instance in the example of Kunti with Karna, because she was in a situation where she was given a mantra, and by this mantra she could call any devata she liked, and when the devata came, he would impregnate her, and she could have children that way. So she'd remain a virgin afterwards. And so she thought she'd try the mantra out. She wasn't convinced that it would work, so she thought she'd try the mantra out to see if it worked. And she chanted the mantra, and the sun god turned up. She was thinking of the sun god when she chanted the mantra, and he turned up. And she basically said, "Oh, you can go now. I was just testing the mantra out." And she said, "No, but this is not what the mantra's about. The mantra is for me to give you a child, so I have to, I've come, and I have to give you a child. But don't worry, you will remain a virgin." And so, he impregnated her, she gave birth to a child, but she didn't know what to do about it. And actually the whole time during the pregnancy, she remained within her quarters within the palace, so no one was aware that she was pregnant. And then when the child was born, she took the child down to the river, put the child in a basket, and set the child, floating down the river. So this is, she was very disturbed about this because it was a child. She didn't want to part with the child. And then years later, when she saw Karna, she understood, this is my child. And she was very, affected by this. And it's kind of interesting because when Karna turned up, it was at the time of there was a trial of arms between the various students of Dronacharya. And the Pandavas were showing off their prowess, particularly Arjuna. And then Karna turned up and he challenged Arjuna to a duel. And it turned out that Karna was actually a better archer than him. But Kunti knew that the Karna, who had turned up at that time, was her son, and she shared that with, I think it was Vidura, she may have shared it with, I can't remember. But someone was aware. There was some recognition from one of the elders of the Kuru dynasty that there was something going on between her and Karna. There was some connection there, and so it may have even been Bhishma. So they understood what was going on there. So we see here how Diti has this natural concern that the embryos within her womb would be protected and prosper within the world. But Kashyapa, he was not so happy with the situation, which we'll see in the next verse. And so she's fearful because she understands that her husband is not only a very powerful sage, but also a great devotee of the Lord. And therefore she is fearful that she may have offended him. And we all have that kind of experience. It's like sometimes we may do things that could be offensive to devotees, so we're concerned. So we go and we offer, please Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance, Pancha Kalpadurubhyascha, because we don't want to offend devotees. Because this is a really important understanding, is that if we offend devotees, not just devotees, but even if we offend ordinary living entities, this can block our progress on the path of bhakti. There's a really interesting story in this regard. Sanatana Goswami was engaged in meditation. Now, Sanatana Goswami, as we know, a very, very greatly advanced devotee, an eternal associate of the Lord, not an ordinary personality, sometimes understood to be Rati Manjari. And so he was engaged in meditation, and in his meditation, it wasn't like he was just thinking about the pastimes of Krishna. He was actually present in the pastimes of Krishna. And then just at the time he was thinking like that, Radha and Krishna were engaging in this particularly interesting pastime where Krishna was playing a trick on Radha. And what was happening is Krishna was picking some fruit, and he was pulling the branch of the tree down so he could reach the fruit. And he said to Radha, I want to pick this fruit for you, but it's too hard to pull the branch down. Come and help me. So she came and she grabbed onto the branch, and she was also pulling down. And he said, hold on tight, you have to pull harder, hold on really tight. And she did, and she pulled down harder, and then Krishna let go. And she was like pulled up into the air, and he said, Krishna, you rascal, what are you doing, So she's pulled up in the air. And so Sanatana Goswami was actually witnessing this directly, and he started to laugh. And just as he started to laugh, this Vaishnava in Vrindavan was going past, but this Vaishnava had some disfigured features on his body. And so he was thinking that Sanatana Goswami was laughing at him. And so because he was thinking of that there was this sense of an aparad, immediately this vision stopped. And Sanatana Goswami was shocked. What happened? Why has this stopped? And so he tried again to enter into this meditation, enter into the pastimes of the Lord, but he couldn't, because this was blocked. So he went and saw Rupa Goswami, and Rupa Goswami, very, very elevated, also very, very elevated Vaishnava, and pure unalloyed devotee of the Lord. And so he was asking Rupa Goswami, this is what happened, and I'm wondering why. Can you help me understand? And Rupa Goswami was asking a few questions. He said, maybe you've offended some Vaishnava at some point. Something happening?
Can you close the door, please?
Yeah, maybe you've offended some Vaishnava. So Sanatana Goswami, he was thinking about it, he said, I can't imagine that I've offended some Vaishnava. Rupa Goswami said, no, it must be that you've offended some Vaishnava, so you need to find out who you've offended. So then Sanatana Goswami, and this is an indication of his deep sincerity in the process of bhakti, and how he doesn't want to offend anyone, and how he's always eager to please the Supreme Personality of God. And we see that the Goswamis, they would be offering thousands of obeisances every day in Vrindavan. This is described by Srinivasacharya in the Sadgoswami Astika, how he, in a scheduled way, they'd be going around and offering obeisances in Vrindavan Dham. But anyhow, so he started to go around and was offering obeisances, requiring the Vaishnavas, please, if I've offended you, please forgive me, and he'd offer his obeisances. And finally, he came across this Vaishnava who was disfigured. And he said, have I offended you in any way? And please, He said, actually, the other day when I was walking past your bhajan kurti, you laughed. You laughed at me because of my disfigured feature. And Sanatana Goswami explained. He said, no, I wasn't laughing at you. I was actually, meditating on this pastime of Radha and Krishna. He explained the pastime to him, and then the Vaishnava understood. And he felt that he'd offended Sanatana Goswami. So we see in the Vaishnava dealings, it's really important to be, very, very conscious of the way we deal with each other and not to offend. And of course, when we're influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, we put ourselves in this situation where we can be more exposed to the risk of offending Vaishnavas. Because in passion, we're caught up in activity and not so aware of how our activities are affecting the environment around us and affecting others. And when you're in ignorance, you're just completely oblivious to what's happening around you. And so in this situation, by our activities, it is quite possible to offend others, Vaishnavas and other living entities. And so very, very, important to try to elevate ourselves beyond passion and ignorance and come to the mode of goodness, because one of the very important parts of the mode of goodness is this awareness of what's going on, awareness of the results of your activities. Very important to cultivate the mode of goodness. Even like sometimes we may be in a situation, and of course, living in a place like Sydney, there's a very, very passionate environment here. You've got this constant movement. It's just constantly going backwards and forwards all day long, backwards and forwards. And this is a component of passion. There's constant activity. And it's not just going one way; it's going both ways. And I mentioned this in class when I was here last time. And it's on that corner. This is a particularly bad corner to have a lot of activity. If it's on that corner, it's not so bad. But on that corner, it's particularly bad. So that will influence this temple. So therefore, it's really important in the temple is to always, and of course this is just a natural thing in a temple, is to always to be focusing on spiritual activities. And Srila Prabhupada, he would regularly emphasize that to the managers of the temple is they have to create a Vaikuntha atmosphere. And the way we create a Vaikuntha atmosphere is by being very, very clean, is keeping the temple, everything very clean, orderly, maintain it in a very nice way, but also to really put a lot of emphasis and focus on spiritual activities such as studying the scriptures, chanting the holy names, all these the regular activities of devotional service, engaging in deity worship, dancing before the Lord. We'll see, in the Nectar Devotion, in chapter 9 in particular, there's a lot of wonderful descriptions there about the activities of devotional service, particularly activities connected with deity worship. And if we focus on these activities, and as I was saying before, focus on cultivating the mode of goodness, then it's very easy to establish this Vaikuntha atmosphere in the temple. And then when one lives in this consciousness, then you're always going to be present in the spiritual world with Krishna. So even in a place like Sydney, it's possible to have this spiritual atmosphere and have this spiritual consciousness and to be absorbed in Krishna's pastimes. And as we were reading last night, Narottam Das Thakur was describing how by always being absorbed in hearing and chanting and taking Krishna Prasad, then actually you gain entrance into the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So Mahaprabhu has given us a really simple process. If you look at the different yogic processes and meditation, all that sort of stuff, very, very difficult. And sometimes, especially with these meditative types of processes, it can take many thousands of years to achieve perfection. We hear of Valmiki Rishi, he meditated, I think it was for 30,000 years before he achieved perfection. And there's stories of other personalities like Hiranyakashipu, he meditated for a long, long time, performed the austerities for a long time. But with the process of bhakti, very quickly, and Narottam Das Thakur was making this point also, very quickly, if you just take shelter, of the lotus feet of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, if you just make the lotus feet of Gauranga Mahaprabhu your only asset in life, the only thing you have of value is the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, then he says, very quickly you'll attain this pure love of Krishna. So, by Mahaprabhu's mercy, we have this process that's very, very effective at destroying the anarthas in the heart. Because this is the problem, is we have so many anarthas in our heart. Thinking, all these things that we're not. All these different impurities, all these different attachments. One of the biggest things is this attachment to the false perception of the self, thinking that I'm so many different ideas, thinking that I'm, what do other people think of me, and all this type of stuff. These things we tend to act in. Sometimes we tend to act in ways because we want people to see us acting in that way. We want them to think that we're something that we're not. But we need to understand what is our eternal position. What is our actual position? There are so many. I was quoting this verse yesterday from Narad Muni, the Sarva Padi Vinindra Muktan Tat Paratvaina Nimalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevana Bhakti Ruchite. We have so many upadis, or false designations, thinking that we're something other than what we are. Well, an upadi means basically a false designation. It's like, if you think you're anything other than Krishna's eternal servant, that's an apati. An apati, your actual identification is, I am Krishna's eternal servant. Jivera Sarupahoy Krishnera Nityadas. This is who I am. Nothing more than that. I'm just Krishna's eternal servant. If we think we're anything related to the ashram or anything related to the varna, then this is an apati. We're nothing to do with these things. If we think that I'm man, if we think that I'm woman, if we think I'm very attractive, if we think I'm very ugly, these are all apatis. We're none of these things. Because the spirit soul is very, very attractive, eternally attractive. If you think I'm old, I'm young, spirit soul is none of these things. The spirit soul is not old, the spirit soul is not young, the spirit soul is eternal. So we need to understand these things and try to act on this situation. And by developing this transcendental consciousness through the process of bhakti, by purifying ourselves through the process of bhakti, then these upadis are destroyed. When we use this body to serve Krishna in whatever way we can, it helps to destroy these false designations. And then, as Narad Muni says, is a tat paratvena nimala hishike, was a sava padini tat paratvena nimala. What's the line I'm thinking of? It says tat paratvena nirmala. So you become restored to that. Nirmala means spotless, without any taint. So this is the actual condition of the living entity, is to be spotless. There's no material contamination. And Krishna, he talks about this in the Gita. He says, Yesha tvantakatam papa jnanam punyam te dvandva bhajani bhakta bhajate mam jnanam. That by I forgot the last line. But anyhow, basically he's saying that many persons in the past, they became purified by this knowledge of me. So by cultivating knowledge of Krishna, by studying the Shastra, by regularly attending the classes, by giving classes whenever you have the opportunity, then we become purified. And Krishna says they become purified by this knowledge of me and they attain me. It means we go back to his abode. And this is the point that Krishna is constantly making in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, that is if you understand that the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities, upon quitting this body, you will not return again to this world, but you'll come back to my abode. In so many ways, he's telling Arjuna that through this process of bhakti, you will return to my abode. So it's of course, if you want to stay here in a place like Sydney and for the rest of your existence and go through birth, death, old age, disease, and all the miseries that are associated with those things, then that's fine. You can do that. The choice is yours. But if you really want to return back to the spiritual abode and engage in loving pastimes of the Supreme Person of Godhead, then we need to diligently apply ourselves to the process of bhakti. And I was listening to a class some time ago where Srila Prabhupada, he was talking about Thakur Haridas. Sometimes when you listen to classes, you read something in the scriptures, it's just sort of like it has an impact. I mean, of course, it's always having an impact, but sometimes it seems like you get that aha moment, or the light sort of goes on inside, and you okay, that's a really important point. I need to apply that. So Prabhupada was talking about Thakur Haridas, and then he was mentioning about this story how I think it was, I can't remember, was it Ramachandra Khan or someone like that, was trying to sway Thakur Haridas from his determination, because the people were these rulers were envious because he was so loved and popular amongst the general people, and they didn't like that. And he was very influential. And because he was a Muslim, externally he was a Muslim, and they were Hindus, they thought, how is it this Muslim is such a revered person? So then Srila Prabhupada was describing, so what happened is they engaged this prostitute to try to bewilder Thakur Haridas to give up his vows. And Thakur Haridas, because he was, because he's such a great devotee of the Lord, he was actually Savakya. He actually knew what was going on. He knew that when this girl came, very, very beautiful, attractive young lady, and she very, very expert at alluring. It's like, you go to King's Cross and, you see these ladies over there. They're not very expert at all. They're just like, have their body hanging out, so, everything's hanging. So, you know exactly what's going on there. You know what they're about. But then previously they weren't like that. They were actually much more cultured in the way they did it, but they had very, very alluring gestures they would use to attract the mind of a man. And so she was trying this with Thakur Haridas. And he knew exactly what was going on. He knew that these people were trying to create some situation for him. So he said to this young lady, he said, certainly I will fulfill your desire, but first I have to finish my vow. And so he did that. He just sat down and she said, just sit here and wait, and surely I will finish soon. And so she sat down and listened to him chanting Hare Krishna. And because Thakur Haridas, when he's chanting the holy name, it's not Nam Aparad or Nam Abas, it's Shuddha Nam. So she's hearing the pure unalloyed name coming from the lips of a pure unalloyed devotee. So it's purifying her heart. And then so she waited, and it came like very, very late. It was like in the wee hours of the morning, and he's still chanting his japa. He said, look, sorry, I haven't finished my vow. I have to keep chanting. So maybe come back tomorrow. And then so she goes away feeling a little frustrated. And then she goes, and then the people who sent her, they said, so did you manage to convince him? He said, no, but it's working. He surely tomorrow he will submit. She was convinced that she was having her effect on him. So she comes back the next day, same sort of thing, and he says, sorry, I didn't actually satisfy you yesterday, but certainly today. Certainly will happen today. So just sit down here and wait for me to finish my vow. And so same thing, and he's just chanting his vows, and same thing happened again. So this went on for several days, and then at one point, she became so purified by hearing Thakur Haridas chanting that she actually felt very, very, impure and contaminated. And actually, she was doing the wrong thing, and she confessed to Thakur Haridas. She was crying. He said, I've actually come here with the purpose of trying to sway you from your vows. He said, that's okay, I knew that. It's not a problem. But because he knew that by hearing the chanting of the holy name, she'd become purified of that desire. And actually, she took Diksha from Thakur Haridas. She became his disciple, and he left her there to care for Tulsi, because he was chanting Prana Tulsi, and to chant japa. And so, she took initiation, she shaved up, and she just became, a tapasvini. And she, just engaged in Krishna consciousness. So we can see through the power of the name, through the power of saintly association, how even someone who has the most irreligious motive can become purified. And we see this, there's so many wonderful stories in the pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You look at Jai and Vijay. These guys were like, they make the mafioso look like angels. It's described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat that they were performing so many sinful activities that Yamaraj, he has a scribe called Chitragupta. Chitragupta, he keeps track of everyone's sinful activities. So Chitragupta had engaged legions of secretaries just to keep track of all the sinful activities that Jai and Vijay, Jagai and Madai were engaging in. Thank you. There's so many, they lived for sinful activities. They relished sinful activities. That was their religion, was sinful activities. No, very, very diligent, in offending and not just offending. They were killing people. They were raping women. All sorts of stuff, and everyone was terrified of them. They were such nasty individuals. But by the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu and by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these very, very degraded persons became Vaishnavas, and very, very elevated Vaishnavas. So we can see the process of bhakti. We should never think that we're so fallen that, I can't become a pure devotee. I can't. No. The process of bhakti is so powerful. We have to understand this. And this is why we see in this age that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's given the most simple process of bhakti, because in this age, people are so fallen. If you look in the previous ages, people had qualities. And even you look in, like now we have the different varnas, predominantly more so in the previous age you had, what is it, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. You had those different varnas. But in Satyuga there was only one varna. There wasn't all these different varnas. And we see in this age, actually the varnas don't really exist. It says kalo sudra sambhava, that actually in this age they're less than sudra. It's such a degraded age. But in Satyuga it was so elevated, there wasn't there so much. These varnas, it was just one varna. And so we're seeing as Kali Yuga progresses, people are becoming more and more degraded. To the point now where there's no designations practically, everyone's just less than a Sudra, and all behaving like animals. And so the process of bhakti given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the process of bhakti has always been there, and there's different practices for different ages. But in this age, everyone is so fallen that all we have to do, all we can do, because as we know in the Bhagavatam, it describes the fallen nature of the jiva. We can't actually take to the practice of yoga. We can't do deity worship properly. We can't do any of these things, fire yagas, etc. So in this age, the living entities are so fallen that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's come himself in this Ordarya manifestation to give this Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Premavadaya Krishnaya Krishna Namne Gauratuche Namaha. He's come in this form of Lord Chaitanya, who's the most munificent incarnation. Krishna, he came previously, he was very beautiful, and he was very loving to his devotees and things like that, engaged in beautiful pastimes. But Lord Chaitanya, he's the most munificent incarnation, and his focus is just to deliver the fallen living entities in this age. So he's delivered a process that's so easy, so simple. All we have to do, as I was describing last time, is chant, dance, and take Krishna Prasad. And if we do that, then Krishna will deliver us very quickly, because the heart will become pure, and very quickly will become purified of all our different anarthas, and be able to return back to the spiritual world. I'll just read, I guess I'll read the next verse because it has a purport. Kashyapa Uvacha, or do we need to read it? Or can we read it tomorrow? Okay, I guess we can do it. Any questions at all? Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first point to consider is mode of goodness, is Prabhupada would say, is a springboard. It's not the goal. The mode of goodness assists us in understanding spiritual life, in understanding the importance of spiritual life. When we're in the mode of ignorance, we just think, what is this stuff? Waste of time. Better I sleep. More practical. Yeah? So understand that. That's the first thing to understand. Is mode of goodness is not the goal. But it assists us in our cultivation of bhakti. In order to cultivate sattva gun, you need to practice sattvic activities. And we see in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, also in the 18th chapter, there's a lot of description. The 14th chapter particularly looks at activities. The 14th chapter is called the Three Modes of Material Nature. So it looks at all the different activities a jiva might perform, and then categorizes them according to goodness, passion, and ignorance. Talks about charity, talks about eating, talks about sleeping, talks about all these sorts of things. So, you can study this chapter and learn the different types. It even talks about speech, how to speak to different, in different ways. So by studying this chapter, we can see. Essentially, it means by applying ourselves to the practice of sadhana bhakti. by rising early, going to bed at a good time. Krishna says, Yukta ha vidihara sha yukta cheta sakama so yukta sapna bodha sha yoga bhavati dukkha. A person who's regulating his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation and work can mitigate all material pangs by practicing the yoga system. So this is a very important thing, is to become regulated. Go to bed at a good time, rise early. When you're eating, eat foods that are in the mode of goodness. Of course, prasadam is transcendental, but I notice here that some of the cooks are using way too many chilies, and it's rajasic, and chilies are not actually very good for your body. They can create problems with digestion, etc. like that. They're nice to use for flavor and things like that, but not that it's like so hot you need a fire extinguisher. And actually the prasad becomes unpalatable. But for someone who's rajasic, it's very palatable. But for someone who's sattvic, it's unpalatable. So you look at the type of food you eat, you look at the amount you eat. Not that you're sort of gorging yourself, so every time you sort of bloated, you're so filled up with prasadam you can hardly move. Although Prabhupada does say in the beginning, he said one should eat till they waddle eat Krishna prasad till you waddle like a duck. Yeah. So his point is, my understanding of his point is that you only take Krishna prasad. You take Krishna prasad so you're satisfied, and the prasad needs to be sumptuous, very very tasty, so it satisfies the tongue. Because if your tongue is not satisfied by by chanting the holy name and tasting Krishna prasad, then it'll drag you other places, looking for other things, where you'll talk nonsense or you'll eat rubbish. And so it's very important that we, engage in chanting and discussing the pastimes of the Lord, and also taking Krishna prasad to satisfy the senses. Because the senses are voracious, and this is the point that Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes in that song Sarirara Vijaja. Jiva, the tongue is so voracious that it will just lead you all over the place. But so therefore, take Krishna prasad to become satisfied. And that's one of the points that Prabhupada makes about Krishna prasad. Narottam Das Thakur is making the same point, and Thakur Bhaktivinoda is making the same point, that we're so fortunate that we have Krishna prasad. If you look at other religious groups, right, they may have various practices, right? They may have praying or whatever it is they do. Yeah? But do they have Krishna prasad? How many religious groups have Krishna prasad? It's quite uncommon. I mean, you go to the church and they have the wafers of it, the sacrament they offer and the drink they have. But that's only once a week, or whenever you go to church. But for us, it's like every day we eat Krishna prasad. And Prabhupada, sometimes he would say you could eat your way back home to Godhead just by taking Krishna prasad. So it's very, very important to look at all the activities you're doing throughout the day and contemplate what mode of nature these activities are in, and how can I bring these activities, what do I need to change to bring these activities to the mode of goodness and ultimately to the transcendental stage. So regulation is very, very important. So going to bed at a proper time and rising early in the morning, very, very important. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. Yeah. See, the thing is, you need to look at it from the perspective of where you are at in the stage of bhakti. And so, because we're following Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, at least this is where I'm at. You may be on a more elevated level, but at least me, I'm on the level of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. So, if I follow the rules and regulations of devotional service, when I'm offering the food to Krishna, then he'll accept. And we see also Another verse that will help us to understand this is this Anya Abhinasha Shunyam Jnanakarma Anukuliyana Krishna Nrsimha Bhakti Uttama. That this verse has been defined by Jiva Goswami as having two components. It has its Tatastha Lakshana and its Sarup Lakshana. So Tatastha means like secondary, right? And then the Sarup Lakshana means its primary components. So it says Anya Abhinasha Shunyam Jnana Kamana Anumrita Anukuliyana Krishna Shila Bhakti. So the point is like it needs to be anukul. You're doing it with a favorable intention. You're doing it, with the idea to please Krishna, and it's an activity, and you're offering it for Krishna. Yeah? So if your purpose of cooking and offering is to do it for the pleasure of Krishna, you're doing an activity for Krishna, right? You're offering food. But if you're doing it for Krishna's pleasure, you're not doing it to satisfy your tongue. Then he'll accept it because this is bhakti. Yeah? That's all. It's that simple. You just do it for Krishna's pleasure. When you cook, so that's why when we cook, we don't smell it, we don't taste it. We just do it for Krishna. And then when we offer the bhoga, we're not looking at it and think, wow, look at that pakora, that's going to taste good. We don't think like that. We do it for Krishna's pleasure. And then he accepts, then it becomes prasad. Is that okay? Pretty simple thing. But often misunderstood. Sometimes you'll hear devotees saying, I'm not going to eat so-and-so's cooking because they're this and they're that, and da-da-da-da. But are they doing it for Krishna's pleasure? This is the criteria. Not whether they're an unpleasant person or whatever. Because Krishna is so magnanimous that he accepts everyone's offering. Is this idea of bhava grahi janardana, that he kind of accepts the mood of the worshipper. Even though sometimes the worshipper may not be very elevated, may have so many anarthas, may have so many ill motives, but if they're doing it for Krishna's pleasure, he accepts that. So we need to be careful not to judge others because of their shortcomings also, because we don't know what's their relationship with Krishna. We don't know how Krishna sees that person. And so we need to be mindful that just because we don't get on with them or we don't like them doesn't mean that's the way Krishna views them. Because every living entity is Krishna's part and parcel. Every living entity, Krishna has a loving relationship with them, even though they may not be aware of it themselves. So we need to be mindful of that and just be more concerned about our own practice of bhakti rather than worrying about others' practice of bhakti. And just try our best to offer things to Krishna with a favorable intention, trying to please him. Yes, Prahlad Prabhu.
Cooking is an extension of daily worship.
Yeah.
But it is daily worship.
Yes.
As a minister for daily worship, you train people how to perform daily worship. Is there any scope to extend it for training people how to cook?
We do. We do train people how to cook.
How do you know?
Yeah, we have courses all the time. But one of the things with training people how to cook is you need to have a kitchen. So in Mayapur we have a kitchen, and every year we're training devotees how to cook. But it's a very, very important part of deity worship. Prabhupada said actually the deity kitchen is as good as the deity room. So it means like whatever standards we follow on the altar need to be followed in the kitchen as well. So that means Vaishnava dress, bathe, tilak, no talking, all this kind of stuff, And it's actually good, a good practice also to do archman before you start cooking and stuff like that, so you're purifying yourself. It's a meditation, because the idea is like, I'm cooking this for Krishna's pleasure. So that means we need to understand what sort of things Krishna likes. And, if you read songs like, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhogarati, if you read the various pastimes of the Chaitanya Charanamrita, you can get an understanding of the types of things that Krishna likes. But never do you read where things are just like laden with chilies. You just don't, you don't read about that. Because Krishna's a young boy. Chilies tend to be something that older people like to eat because their senses are so burnt out by eating all this stuff they can't taste things anymore. But Krishna doesn't eat that much chili, just a little bit, but not, like I had a sabji yesterday, I actually couldn't eat it. It was unpalatable because it had so much chili in it. And I couldn't taste the vegetables. The spicing is meant to enhance the taste of the vegetables, not destroy the taste of the vegetables. So it's a really important thing. But because of our conditioned nature, we tend to cook the way we like things and not meditating upon the way Krishna likes things. And that needs to be our meditation, is how to cook in a way or how to serve in a way that's pleasing to Krishna. So yeah, we do train devotees. And I have thought of doing something in Australia, but I think probably the easiest thing, and I'm just like looking at how to do this, is to do something online. Have online cooking courses, because and I'm actually working on writing a course, online course with a devotee in Mawullumbar.
The reason I'm asking is standards. Black or white. In temples, you want to be healthy. That's the standard of things too.
Yeah, but then the thing is like there's two. It's like parallel kind of standards there. Like Prabhupada would say, for the devotees, the prasad should be sumptuous. It's very tasty and nice to eat. For Krishna, it should be opulent. If you eat Mahaprasadam every day, guaranteed you're going to wind up with health problems. But Krishna doesn't have that issue. He can eat paniya sabjis, 6 times a day or 10 times a day. It doesn't matter. Krishna can digest the whole universe. We're lucky if we can digest our breakfast. So we have limitations of the body. Krishna doesn't have those limitations. So, and generally you see, especially you see, with sometimes with Indians when they come to the temple, is they'll just take a little bit of Mahaprasad. Not, like we tend to take, whole plates and just eat all the pakoras, everything we can from the offering, just pack our plate up. I mean, can you imagine, right? Like every morning Krishna's offered, different milk sweets, like 4 or 5 different milk sweets. If you ate that every day for a year, what condition would your body be in? You'd likely have some issues with your liver, because it's just super rich. But for Krishna, it's nothing. So, yeah. But the prasad needs to be well cooked, properly spiced. I had a subject the other day. Just the spices were burnt. So it's an art. This Bengal, it's more Bengali style, but also the Gujarati and stuff like that. But this Indian style of cooking is an art which it seems that many people are not getting it. You get some people who are very good at it, but many people just don't get it. They don't get the spicing right. They don't get I had a subject the other day where it was okra, and the okra was raw, wasn't properly cooked. And sometimes there's a fine line, and Damodar Rati Mataji knows this very well, it's a fine line between raw and cooked. And it's just sometimes just a few minutes, and then overcooked is a few minutes more. So it's just a matter of becoming expert with it and learning how to do it. And the way to learn it is from someone who is an expert, because there's so many, just like when I learnt cooking burfi and stuff like that from Kalangana Mataji, or from someone who learnt from her. And with burfi, the way, like oftentimes you'll find devotees just look at it and think, oh yeah, it's ready. But that's not actually how you know burfi's ready. When you cook the burfi, it comes to a point where the oil starts to come back out of the. You touch it and your finger doesn't stick. It's ready. If it sticks to your finger, it's painful, but it's not ready. Yeah? But if you touch it, and she learnt that from the Wallas in Vrindavan. So you learn these things from experienced cooks. All these little details, or how you make sweet rice. Or how you make halava. It's like when you make halava, there's certain kind of signs that tell you when to do the next step. So it's something that needs to be learnt from an expert. And it's not something you can just. It's not do it yourself. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki Jai Nitai Gop Premanandi. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Hare Krishna.